Good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well today. And as it is Tuesday morning, we're going to spin around the league, take a look at the results that happened in this most recent week of football, and see where they leave us as Seahawks fans. And the thing about the loss on Sunday was that so many other games went the way we wanted those games to go this week. We got some really good results. We got some really favorable outcomes, and it was kind of too bad we couldn't put the cap on it with actually winning ourselves. But the upshot there is that despite the loss, I don't think things have gotten that much worse. I still feel pretty good about where we are. And that's on both sides. That's both with the Seahawks and the the Broncos draft pick. So let's run it down here real quick. As of this recording, I actually just finished watching the Steelers Colts game. We got the Steelers that fourth win, which is significant potentially. I don't think the strength of schedules would have crossed over each other, but Pittsburgh getting that fourth win is significant. It keeps them away from where Denver's pick is probably going to land. Denver currently has 3 wins, and I'll say more. I've already said this, but I don't think they win another game this year. So the more teams we see get to win number 4, the better it is for that pick. So Pittsburgh, check mark. Now the rest of the year they can kind of do whatever. I'm pretty confident they're not going to win another game, but I don't think they're going to need to. So that was a good result. And rewinding back to Thursday, we got pretty good results, I would say. The Lions, I didn't say this at the time, but I have to admit, if the Lions had won that game on Thanksgiving against Buffalo at 5-6, they would have been right in the middle of the playoff hunt. I didn't even really think about that because it's the Lions and they were 1-7, and it was like, no, I'm sorry, they were 1-6 at one point. I wasn't really thinking about Lions playoffs, but when you step back and look at it, if they had won that game 5-6, they're right there. Now I wouldn't have been worried about it because we have the tiebreaker on the Lions, but it's one more team that could have been in the playoff race that isn't, which is good. I think that's probably a little bit better than the Lions winning another game to drive their pick down because they already have 4 wins. They're probably good on that front. So, as it turns out, I think Buffalo winning that game was actually pretty good. We got the Giants loss, which I think was the most important thing we could have gotten on Thanksgiving, other than, Thanksgiving dinner, I guess. And they look poised to maybe be that team in the NFC that just completely falls off a cliff. I know some people are going to say it's going to be the Seahawks because they gave up 40 points to a pretty bad Las Vegas Raiders team. But that Giants team, with that remaining schedule, they might struggle to pull a winning record. That's possible. It's looking very realistic to me. And they, more than any other team in the NFC right now, looks like they might just give up their spot, because I've said this a few times now. I'll repeat it. You've got 8 teams in the NFC vying for 7 playoff spots. The Giants may end up being the team that just kind of throws themselves out of the arena and just leaves the other 7 teams to just pick up the remaining playoff spots. So that was good. Could have used the Vikings loss, I guess, but again, we're not going to catch the Vikings anyway, so who cares? That game didn't really mean much of anything to me. No, we kind of wanted the Patriots to win, but it's so insignificant, especially now that we know we've lost to the Raiders. So Thursday went pretty well. Got to Sunday. I'm not going to talk about the Raiders Seahawks because I've already talked about it at length, and I think you guys, I don't need to explain why the outcome was not to our advantage. So many of these other games really were, though. You had the Bucks and Browns. We got the Browns upset in overtime. Big. Huge. Well, I don't want to put too fine of a point on it. I don't want to act like this is a huge thing, but there is some universe where we end up jockeying with Tampa Bay for playoff seeding, maybe even a playoff spot. I know it's really unlikely, but they do have the tiebreaker, which is a little uncomfortable. If we both win the division, then a tiebreaker could decide who gets the 3 seed and who gets the 4. And there is some tiny possibility that we end up competing for a wild card spot, and an L like that against the Browns is going to go a long way in keeping Tampa Bay out in the event of like the Falcons suddenly catching a little bit of fire here at the end. So every little advantage helps, and this might even be a bigger deal because the Tampa Bay scenario is so unlikely. Cleveland gets win number 4. Now, they were going to get a couple wins anyway because they're getting Watson back now, but they've notched win number 4, and now it's going to be really hard for their pick, which obviously they sent to Houston, to be above where Denver's pick is going to end up because they got to win number 4. So like I said, these teams getting to win number 4, thumbs up. All right, Bengals, Titans also went our way. That was a really, really neutral game, admittedly, but the Titans played the Broncos, so the Titans losing hurts the Broncos' strength of schedule, which pushes their pick up. So that was a desirable result. So Bengals win, that was good. Dolphins, Texans, that not so much, but I don't think anybody expected that. Dolphins were up 30-0 at halftime. The Texans are, I mean, they're not tanking, but there's very little interest in winning over there. That was never going to happen, so whatever. We also didn't get the Jets losing, which would have been preferable, but I've talked a little bit about the Bears situation in regards to the draft already. I think it'll work itself out even if they don't win another game this year. And either way, the Bears were pretty much out of it as soon as it was announced that Justin Fields wasn't going to play. So it's not like that was a realistic possibility. So that didn't go our way, but it never was going to. Falcons, Commanders. So interesting one here. The Falcons lose to the Commanders. And first of all, just on the face of it, on the surface of it, that put the Commanders in the playoffs ahead of the Seahawks. Seahawks are currently not in the playoffs. If the season ended today, they wouldn't be. The only reason why that is because Washington's played one more game because they haven't had their bye week yet, and we have. So I understand that's going to be rectified before the end of the season. But still, as of right now, they're in and we're not. So that's obviously, on the face of it, not great. And I think we would have preferred Atlanta winning this game. But I will say this. Atlanta, they were the team that was kind of hanging around, right? They were hanging around, not really in the playoff hunt, but they technically they were. Now they're 5-7. I had a look at their schedule. They do have a few pretty money in the bank wins. I think they got the Saints, they got the Steelers, they got the Cardinals. If they win those 3 games, that gets them to 8 wins. But then, in order to get to 9, to get to that winning record, you need to either beat Baltimore or you need to beat Tampa. So, at this stage, it's going to be difficult. It's an uphill battle for Atlanta to get to a winning record. It seems to me they're an 8-win team. Very unlikely 8 wins is good enough to get into the playoffs. You would need multiple teams ahead of them to just completely fall off the board. So, I'm going to say that at the very least, Atlanta is now a non-factor. It's going to be really hard for them to get back in this race. So I'm going to say that is a positive development, even though Washington continuing to win is a little bit of a problem. What else do we have here? We have Broncos, Panthers. Now, this one speaks for itself. This was the toilet bowl, and it went beautifully for Seahawks fans. Not only did Denver lose, Denver played probably their worst game of the year. The defense didn't play well. The offense didn't earn a single point, not a single meaningful point for the Broncos offense. And as I make this video Monday night, late Monday night, Nathaniel Hackett hasn't been fired yet. So if they weren't going to fire him after that game, they're not firing him for any game. They would have to get blasted by like 50 points in a game for them to consider moving off of Hackett at this point. So they're in it with him for the rest of this season. That's the only conclusion that can be drawn, meaning that we don't have to worry about Dom Capers or Evero or somebody else stepping up into that head coaching role and motivating people better and finding a way to a win or two. No, I think this Denver team has basically quit, and I think they're going to go 3-14. I think it's happening. You look at Tankathon, you do the math, you look at Chicago's strength of schedule, you look at the fact that the Rams and Broncos play each other. If the Broncos lose out, I believe that guarantees us a top 2 pick. If Denver loses out, we get a top 2 pick. I'm pretty sure it would be number 2 because I don't think Houston's going to be able to win 2 more games. But regardless, we're getting number 2 overall if Denver loses out. And I believe at this point that is the only logical conclusion to this season after the way they played on Sunday against that Carolina team that is not good themselves. Ravens-Jaguars. This was clutch. This was low-key clutch by the Jaguars. Shout out Trevor Lawrence. You're awake. It doesn't make up for what you did in London, but it helps. Jacksonville has kind of removed themselves from the top of the draft board. You can see that their pick has slipped a little bit, all the way down to 11 actually, taking them out of reasonable contention for a top pick ahead of Denver. So good result there. Very nice. Very appreciated. Thank you, Jacksonville. Chargers-Cardinals. This game, I'm pretty indifferent to it. This game, admittedly, seeing your division rival lose like that is fun. I appreciated it. But it's not like the Cardinals were a threat to us at this point anyway. So there was a little bit of an argument to be made strength of schedule-wise that we wanted the Chargers to lose. But I'm not unhappy about the Cardinals losing, so sure, why not? Rams-Chiefs, this was a no-brainer. Once you heard all the players that the Rams are going to be missing. Not much to say, but we got the result we probably wanted. I did talk a little bit in my pre-week video about how there was an argument to be made we actually would want the Rams to win at this point. But at the end of the day, the Rams are going to get to play the Broncos, and that game is probably just going to determine it. So we don't really need the Rams to win other games this year because they're going to get a crack straight up at Denver, and may the best man lose. Saints, Niners, with the practice squad the Saints sent out there, there's no surprise that they weren't able to pull it off. 13-0. Not exactly a great performance by the Niners offense, but more than enough. And the odds of us winning the division have cratered, admittedly. I will concede that. That's the thing. Like, so many things went well for the Seahawks this week. So many results were positive, but the Seahawks lost and the 49ers won. So those are like the 2 big things. So I know it's kind of hard to see through, find the silver lining, even though there are big silver linings. But didn't get what we wanted there. Packers, Eagles, I kind of could go either way on this game. Like I said, the Packers are now dead and buried. They've got 8 losses. They still got to play the Vikings. Honestly, they still have to play the Lions and Bears, and those teams are playing good. So at this point, the only logical inference to make is that the Packers are sunk. No way they get back in it. We don't have to worry about them. And we weren't going to catch the Eagles anyway, so I got no problem with it. And that's the rundown of what happened in week number 12. Good results for the Seahawks overall. Not perfect. And there were some big results that really didn't go our way, of course. But life is good. And again, I want to reiterate here. If Denver loses out, we're getting the number 2 overall pick. I think that's pretty much set in stone. I don't think anything could undo that. The only thing that could would be if Chicago's strength of schedule collapses or Denver's goes through the roof. Then maybe Chicago could get involved. But otherwise, I don't think there's anything between Denver and the number 2 overall pick if they lose out, and I think they're losing out. And I know this sounds kind of weird, and I'm not trying to downplay the importance of the Seahawks this year being good, but that number 2 overall pick is probably more important to the prospects of this franchise than whether or not we can get into the playoffs this year and probably not win a game. Just being honest with the way this defense is playing. Sorry. With a defense like this, good luck winning a lot of playoff games. You better have Pat Mahomes if you want to do that. And we have a good quarterback, but not quite that. All right, I'll see you guys later today. Peace out. Go Hawks. That's the rundown. and things are still looking pretty good to me.